One of the founding moments of genetics, and indeed in the modern understanding of biology, happened in an Austrian monastery when Gregor Mendel was one of the gardeners. He had time to experiment with his pea plants, and we're not talking about small experiments, we're talking about thousands of pea plants over a period of years. This is one of those dedicated, meticulous studies in science ever. And Mendel figured out some amazing things about how traits are passed on that really upended how people understood how parents uh, pass their traits on to their offspring. So, why pea plants? Well, first off, they were available. They were around. They have a lot of observable traits that we'll look at in the next slide. They're fast growing. They can both cross and self-pollinate. Cross-pollinate means pollinating another plant. Self-pollinate means the flowers can pollinate itself. These are all traits. And another one that Mendel wasn't aware of that we didn't figure out till later is that pea plants show a lot of simple dominant recessive patterns. Where we'll talk later on in modern genetics, we discovered that's not the case for the human species. We don't have many traits that are either dominant or recessive. But that is getting ahead of the game. Right now, it is why pea plants. So here's a short thing of what traits Mendel was looking at. And we're going to focus mostly on one trait or two at a time, but he did all of these, let me get out of the way, multiple times. And including things like flower color, stem size, stem placement, how tall it got, the color of the pods, the shape of the seeds, all these things he studied and looked at very closely. We're going to look at one of those, and just as an example, in experiment 1, as the text calls it, he took 2 true breeding pea plants, one violet, one white. That meant these plants only produced violet or white flowers. And the common sense knowledge of the day was traits are blended in the offspring. So the expectation was, hey, if you cross violet with a white flower, you should get a pink flower. That is the case with some other plants, but not with pea plants. Pea plants do something different. When you cross a violet with a white flower, the resulting hybrid, the F1 generation, is all violet. There are no white plants. And as our experiment goes, that seems pretty airtight, right? There's no evidence of anything going on, but Mendel wondered what happened to the white traits, these what he called factors. We didn't have words like alleles or genes yet. So the real genius in his experiment was to not stop at this, but instead, he allowed the F1 generation to self-fertilize. And this created the F2 generation. And he discovered a 3-to-1 ratio of violet flowers to white flowers. And this was relatively unexpected, but his numbers were pretty solid that, hey, this is what's going on. We're talking about 700 violet flowers to 200 or so white flowers. This is almost perfect data. It doesn't get better than this, and some statisticians have wondered, did he fudge his numbers? Maybe a smidgen, but his results have been verified so many times that he is credited with being the first one to formulate this theory that we now call the law of segregation. In this law, we talk about each individual has 2 copies of each trait, one from each parent. And each trait has 2 factors that are, each individual has 2 copies of each trait. And you need 2 copies to control a trait. One's dominant, meaning it's always expressed. One's recessive, meaning it's only expressed if both of those inherited factors are the recessive variety. Factors separate and go to different gametes when parents reproduce. That means parents can only send one copy of the trait to their offspring. Right? That's what we saw with this one. When we do the Punnett squares in class, this hopefully make more sense, that this F1 can give only the trait for violet flowers or white flowers. It can't give both. Otherwise, the ratios would look different. And it's important to stress, he didn't do this once. He did this thousands of times with different traits, and it always came up with a roughly 3-to-1 dominant to recessive. So this is, again, is called the law of segregation, and we will continue on talking about Mendel's second experiment where he wondered, well, what happens when you look at multiple traits instead of just one? All right, I'll continue that with Mendel's second experiment in the next video. As always, I will see you in class, and please contact me with any questions that you have.